Chapter 391, Inescapable. Mr. Zott, bad news. Bernard rushed over in a panic. What's all the fuss about? Lincoln said, annoyed. With Caspian there, Lincoln felt embarrassed that Bernard was acting like this. Mr. Zott, that man from the TMAA showed up again. He even brought a bunch of people with him, Bernard said fearfully. What? They're here again? Lincoln's face hardened. Horace had appeared again. Lincoln was really scared. Horace's attacks were too cruel. His chest still hurt from being trampled. Mr. Lynch. Lincoln looked at Caspian urgently. His bodyguards were no match for Horace. He was too powerful. He could only ask for Caspian's help. Caspian's expression hardened. Horace was truly fearless. How could he show up again? Did he not learn his lesson back then? Horace arrived with a booming laughter. Caspian, you'll surely die this time, Horace said. Thousands of martial arts experts had rushed in with him. You think too highly of yourself. The person who's going to die is you, Caspian said nonchalantly. Horace snarled like an animal. He was starting to feel uneasy. He had thousands of elite soldiers with him. With Azure Flames and Skyfeather Pavilion destroyed, Caspian would surely be daunted by him. However, Caspian was still pompous. Could it be that he had no idea how powerful the TMAA was? Horace said coldly, Caspian, you must have heard about the destruction of Azure Flames and Skyfeather Pavilion. Kneel before me now and beg for mercy. Halfway through his sentence, he noticed that Caspian was smirking while staring at him. Caspian was judging Horace, thinking that he must be out of his mind. Kneel before him and beg for mercy? He must be dreaming. This tiny association wanted to challenge him? Caspian could not be bothered to waste more of his time on this blockhead. Get out, Caspian spat out. Horace was seething. Caspian was clearly disrespecting him with that attitude of his. You've got the balls, Caspian. I'll show you what you get for offending the TMAA. Boys, attack him, Horace yelled furiously. Thousands of martial arts experts rushed toward Caspian. Kill him, they shouted. The men looked majestic. Many were yielding weapons. Each of the men was at the peak of their prowess, with many of them being eternal grandmasters. This lineup was indeed very powerful. Horace was sure that Caspian would definitely not survive this time. However, Caspian appeared nonchalant still. Horace and his men were not a threat to him at all. How dare you come for Caspian? Go to hell! Sylvia was the first to step forward. Kill them! Show no mercy! She cried out. Clad in steel armor from head to toe, hundreds of Caspian's men charged toward the enemy in unison. In the blink of an eye, both sides collided. They began fighting. Blood-curdling screams came and went. At first, Lincoln's 1,000-man army was confident. However, the moment they began fighting, they had an ominous feeling. The armored soldiers were all yielding daggers in their hands. The blades were razor sharp. Even though the experts from TMAA were great fighters, they were nothing compared to the armored soldiers. Horace's eyes widened in fear as he watched the martial arts experts of TMAA gradually diminish in numbers. These men were almost at the eternal grandmaster level, but none of them turned out to be a match for Caspian and his men. Where did these people come from? Caspian was not the only one who was powerful. His men were all unbeatable as well. If Horace were to know that Caspian was the Deituranian god of war, he would have died from fright. Horace began to regret his decision. It did not even take half an hour for all of the martial arts experts to be killed. The ground was covered in blood, and corpses piled like mountains. The air reeked of blood. Caspian's men put away their daggers, retreated, and went to stand behind Caspian as if nothing had happened. There were thousands of expert martial artists, but they were gone in the blink of an eye. Horace was petrified. Even if he were to return alive, Nixon would definitely make him pay for having lost so many of his men. I released you just a few days ago, but here you are again on a suicide mission. Don't blame me for not showing mercy anymore, Caspian said coldly. Horace's legs gave out. He fell on his knees as soon as Caspian finished his sentence. Mr. Lynch, spare me. I must have been out of my mind to challenge you. Please, just think of me as garbage and throw me out, Horace pleaded. Caspian had defeated him before. This time, he did not even have the courage to fight Caspian. It had not been easy for him to attain the position of a protector within the TMAA. He didn't want to die so easily. I'll spare you your life, but I must make you remember, Caspian said indifferently. What? Horace was momentarily stunned. Suddenly, he felt that something was amiss. I'll remove one of your arms, Caspian exclaimed. The moment Caspian finished his sentence, Horace made a run for it. He wanted to escape. Caspian was stunned for a moment. He expected Horace to grapple with him, but he actually escaped. Aster and Avery stepped forward once they saw Horace trying to escape. Mr. Lynch, let us kill this bastard. Both Aster and Avery looked a little excited. Horace was responsible for the destruction of Azure Flames and Skyfeather Pavilion. Since Caspian knew about the feud between Horace and the two, he gave his permission. He nodded and said, "Go ahead." "Thank you, Mr. Lynch." Both of them went at Horace without any hesitation. "You piece of shit! Where do you think you're going?" Aster shouted as he drew near to Horace. Horace was startled when he saw Aster and Avery chasing after him. It was not that he was afraid of the two. He just did not want to be entangled in some kind of trouble. Otherwise, he would definitely die if Caspian were to make a move. However, it seemed like he had to get rid of Aster and Avery in order to escape. "You vagabonds, I can't believe you dare to come after me," Horace said through gritted teeth. He had defeated both of them before. They were no match for him. Horace turned around and fought them both. The three of them fought with all their might. Even though the two had joined forces, they were still no match for Horace. Aster and Avery were only eternal grandmasters, while Horace was an innate grandmaster. They were simply not at his level. Both of them were losing. "Caspian, should I help them out?" Sylvia asked urgently. "There's no need. Let them be," Caspian said as he shook his head. Caspian had never really approved of the two anyway. Before this, they had disregarded Caspian. They only thought of approaching Caspian for help when they got into trouble. Caspian was not some good Samaritan who needed to rush to their aid. He wanted to use this opportunity to let them remember that if they wanted his help, they would have to obey his orders in the future. Chapter 392, Avenge Me. Sylvia did not question him further. She was not particularly fond of the folks from the traditional martial arts sphere anyway. The people of the traditional martial arts sphere carried themselves in an arrogant and domineering manner just because they were trained in martial arts. The king had made it clear before that he wanted to eradicate these forces. Suddenly, there was a loud muffled sound. A vicious expression appeared on Horace's face. "If you insist on blocking my way, don't blame me when I hurt you," Horace yelled. The menacing air emanating from him grew stronger. He clenched his fists and threw deadly punches at Aster and Avery. His two punches were extremely fast and powerful. He did not hold back. Both of them did not dodge the punches in time as they were too fast. Two thuds were heard. Aster and Avery flew out. They crashed onto the ground and vomited blood. They really could not defend themselves against Horace's punches. Indeed, there remained a huge gap between an eternal grandmaster and an innate grandmaster. Watching the two scurry away after suffering defeat, Horace simpered. They had lost to him once. This time, it was still the same. If it were not for the urgent situation, he would have already killed these two. He had to escape first. "Sylvia, now!" Caspian said coldly. "Yes, sir." Sylvia rushed toward Horace. She caught up with Horace in the blink of an eye. He could feel a chilling sensation behind him. A menacing energy was approaching him. When he turned his head, he saw a kick flying toward him. With a loud bang, Sylvia landed her kick on Horace's face. Horace fell to the ground. He looked at Sylvia with pure shock in his eyes. Those armored soldiers were strong, but this woman standing in front of him was even stronger. Who was Caspian? How could there be so many expert fighters around him? Moreover, these people were all loyal to him. "Remove one of his arms," Caspian said nonchalantly. "Yes, sir." Sylvia took a sharp knife out of her leather boots. "No, please, let me go," Horace pleaded fearfully. His pleas were totally ignored by Sylvia. She held the knife in a tight grip and amputated his arm. Blood-curdling screams escaped his lungs. A bloodied arm fell to the ground. "My arm! Fuck! It's so painful, I'm gonna die!" Horace writhed on the floor as blood gushed out of the wound. A few minutes later, Horace passed out from the pain. "Drag him out," Caspian said as he glanced at Horace. "Yes, sir." A few of the armored soldiers went and took Horace away. Aster and Avery got up and came before Caspian, asking, "Mr. Lynch, let us kill this bastard. He made them into vagabonds." They wished they could just cut Horace up into 1,000 pieces. Did I give you permission to kill him? Caspian asked coldly as he looked at them. No, you didn't. Aster and Avery were shaken. They could feel the menacing energy coming from Caspian. They would not dare to go against Caspian's orders. He was too powerful. If he wanted to, he could just lift a finger and they'd both be dead in a second. Their only option left was to follow Caspian. Otherwise, they could only roam around as vagabonds. Caspian smiled when he saw that they had lowered their heads. It seemed like both of them had begun to obey him. With this, he could now have control over all the forces in Diatoran. Caspian ordered his troops to head to Stuart residence immediately. Only Lincoln and the others were to stay and deal with the rest of matters here. Caspian was prepared to bring Sylvia, Aster, Avery, and hundreds of his armored soldiers to Stuart residence. Recently, many expert martial artists had appeared in South Lake City. They had disrupted the order of the entire city. However, Caspian had no time to waste on them. He had to go to Stuart residence, where all the main fighters were gathered. Let's go, Caspian said. Hundreds of SUVs headed toward Stuart residence. As Lincoln watched Caspian and his troops leave, a look of determination appeared on his face. Bernard, let's wrap things up and get ready to deal with the outsiders, Lincoln ordered. Yes, Mr. Zott. I was just thinking of meeting the folks from the TMAA, Bernard said with a smile. Standing outside the Stuart family estate were masked men clad in black robes. They were all from Shadowgate. We've gotten the latest update, Mr. Shane. Caspian and hundreds of his expert soldiers are heading toward us. Mr. Xenos is also leading the TMAA here. The other forces and gangs have also sent many of their men over here, Fabian reported to a man. This man was wearing an embroidered robe. He was Gilbert Shane, the 10th elder of Shadowgate. Interesting? Very interesting. Caspian's really arrogant, huh? It seems like he wants to steal the Eldorian scroll fragment, Gilbert exclaimed with displeasure. Previously, they had fought in New Bay. He was up for another challenge against Caspian. Gilbert turned and looked at the masked man. Then, he smiled and said, Caspian obliterated the entire Haw family, Charles. He even killed your son. You'll have to do a good job this time. You must avenge your family. Back then, Charles was rescued by the Elder of Shadowgate. This gave him a resolution to join Shadowgate for his revenge. I must kill him, or I won't be able to live with myself, Charles said angrily. His heart was filled with resentment. He used to be the god of gambling, always carefree. It was all because of Caspian that he lost everything. Even his son was killed. He had to give up his assets that were worth tens of billions as well in order for Shadowgate to save him. Whenever he thought of Caspian, he would imagine cutting him up into 1,000,000 pieces. I heard that the Stuart family has also fallen into dire straits because of Caspian. This man's a pest, Gilbert said as he looked toward Fabian. Fabian did not say anything. He had heard about the things that happened in the Stuart family. Indeed, Caspian's appearance had brought on many changes. If the Stuart family wanted to rise, they had to resort to using certain tactics. If Caspian dared to stop them, the Stuart family must get rid of him. Let us go to the Stuart family estate as well, Gilbert said. Hundreds of expert soldiers from Shadowgate began their journey toward the Stuart family estate. In order to obtain the Eldorian scroll fragment, Shadowgate dispatched 500 expert soldiers. Each of them was an elite member of Shadowgate. On a hilly ground not far from the Stuart family estate, Nixon saw a miserable Horace lying on a stretcher. He did not expect that Caspian would be so cocky. At this point, he was declaring war against the TMAA. You must avenge me, Mr. Xenos. Caspian is totally looking down on our association, Horace cried out resentfully. Chapter 393 The Congregation. Nixon glanced at Horace scornfully. If it was not for his cowardice, they would not have lost thousands of their experts. All the various forces had come to snatch the Eldorian scroll fragment. Losing thousands of experts had a great impact on them. That's enough. You'll have to recover from your injuries first, and then we'll talk, Nixon said dismissively. Mr. Xenos, Horace cried out emotionally. Enough. I'll make a decision on my own, so don't interfere anymore, Nixon said irritably. Yes, Mr. Xenos. Horace could only nod in acquiescence. He did not dare to say a word more. To Nixon, Horace was just a useless person. He would not cause a scene over him. Horace was extremely miserable. He knew what Nixon meant. He worked his fingers to the bone for the TMAA, yet this was all he got in the end. Let's go, Nixon said as he looked at the Stewart family estate in the distance. The most important thing now was to snatch the Eldorian scroll fragment. As for the matter regarding Caspian, it would not be too late to deal with him later. Nixon was not too bothered about Caspian. There were tens of thousands of traditional martial arts experts at the Stewart family estate. All the different forces had gathered at the Stewart family estate. Everyone there was panicking. Mr. Stewart, what should we do now? There are so many outsiders, and they look menacing. They look like martial arts fighters. They're affecting our lives. In the lineage shrine of the Stewart family estate were the villagers. They had a dejected look on their faces as they discussed martial arts fighters among themselves. Silent, Xandros said irritably. The place instantly became silent. Xandros held the highest position in the Stewart family estate. Nobody would dare to go against his will. This is the lineage shrine, and you're making so much noise in here. How's it appropriate? Xandros said coldly. Mr. Stewart, you can't blame us. So many martial arts experts appeared out of nowhere. We're all really afraid. That's right. What if they start hurting us? A few of the elderly people began discussing among themselves. The sudden appearance of the traditional martial arts experts was a sign that something was wrong. Moreover, those fighters would start tearing each other apart whenever they had any disagreements. The people living in the Stewart family estate had never experienced anything chaotic like that. The past few days had been torturous. Xandros scowled. He knew that the fighters had severely impacted the lives of the villagers as well. Since he held the highest position in the village, he had a duty to solve the predicament for everyone. Nonetheless, Xandros was helpless as well. He was already an old man. The expert fighters could not even be bothered to listen to him. If it were not for his old age, they would have already attacked him. I know that everybody's worried. I promised to solve the problems. I've already notified Caspian. He'll be here soon, Xandros said with a sigh. Caspian? The crowd looked at one another upon hearing this name. They knew of Caspian. Previously, when their village was being demolished, it was Caspian who came forward to rescue them. Moreover, he had also improved the economic situation of the entire Stewart family estate. The villagers were extremely grateful to Caspian. Nevertheless, would he be able to help them this time? These were traditional martial arts fighters. They weren't easy opponents. Mr. Stewart, we're all truly grateful toward Caspian. However, there are tens of thousands of traditional martial arts fighters here. How would he be able to handle these many fighters? Even if he were to show up, what could he do? A man came forward to say. He's right. We can't possibly drag him down with us. Every single one of the fighters is haughty. Caspian won't be able to handle it. The villagers were having a heated discussion. It was true that they wanted to have those fighters chased out of the Stewart family estate. However, Caspian was powerless and alone. He was definitely no match for these people. If something was to happen to him, they would not be able to forgive themselves. Enough with the ramblings. The decision's been made. You may go back and wait for the time being. Caspian's stronger than you think. When the time comes, Caspian and I will find a solution together, Xandros said as he waved them away. Even though they were still worried, they did not dare to go against Xandros' order. As he watched the villagers leave, Xandros murmured, "You have no idea how powerful Caspian is yet, huh?" Xandros knew how powerful Caspian was as he had come face with him before. The strength that was showcased during his battle with Frank and the others was even stronger. He knew about everything that went down in South Lake City, even though he had only been staying within the Stewart family estate. Because of Xandros, Lincoln immediately stepped back from prominence. He even began working under Caspian. No average person could ever make Lincoln turn into someone subservient. These villagers did not know how powerful Caspian actually was. Alas, the secret of the Eldorian scroll fragment has been leaked, Xandros lamented. The Eldorian scroll fragment was the reason these people still remained in the Stewart family estate. They were here to guard the fragment. Only the ones with the greatest prestige would know about this secret. Unexpectedly, this secret that had been hidden for hundreds of years was eventually leaked to others. Thank God I gave the emerald pendant to Caspian. Otherwise, it'd be a problem, Xandros thought to himself. He was already over 100 years old. His days were numbered. The secret of the Stewart family estate must be guarded by a successor. The people of the Stewart family estate were ordinary people. If he were to pass the engraved emerald pendant to them, it would only endanger their lives. Caspian appeared at the crucial moment. Since Caspian was half a steward, Xandros handed the engraved emerald pendant into his hands. Xandros felt slightly relieved to have it guarded in Caspian's hands. The pendant was the most important item to obtain the Eldorian scroll fragment. Without the pendant, even 1,000,000 people would not be able to obtain it. The Eldorian scroll fragment is not for anyone to obtain, Xandros said with a glint in his eyes. The energy he emanated suddenly surged. At that moment, a convoy of SUVs was heading toward the Stewart family estate. Other vehicles on the road maintained their distance when they saw the SUVs. Even the traditional martial arts fighters would be intimidated by such a spectacle. Caspian was in the first car. I've got the latest update from Lincoln. He's eliminated some of the traditional martial arts fighters in South Lake City, Sylvia reported from the front passenger seat. Caspian nodded. Those were weak people who could easily be dealt with by Lincoln's bodyguards. Currently, all of the prominent people had gathered at the Stewart family estate. How's the situation at the Stewart family estate? Caspian asked calmly. He was more concerned about the situation at the Stewart family estate. The Eldorian scroll fragment was extremely important and must be heavily guarded. If it were to fall into the hands of someone evil, the world would definitely be turned upside down. Mr. Lynch, the people from the TMAA, Shadowgate, and a few of the forces from Dord City have all gathered at the Stewart family estate. They make up half of the traditional martial arts sphere's experts from Diatoran. Chapter 394, Kill Without Mercy. It was indeed terrifying to have almost half of the experts from the Team AA show up at the Stewart family estate. The Eldorian scroll fragment was coveted by many. A few days ago, Caspian had Sylvia plant a few of their informants in the Stewart family estate. These informants had undergone rigorous training. Their information would undoubtedly be reliable. After hearing Sylvia's report, a grim expression appeared on Caspian's face. Their gathering was both an opportunity and a challenge. He could use this opportunity to reform the traditional martial arts sphere. Moreover, the appeal of the Eldorian scroll fragment could be used to lure many elite families of traditional martial arts out of hiding. Nevertheless, these traditional martial arts experts were not pushovers. If they were to put up a fight, it would lead to a huge problem. The Stewart family estate could be destroyed. Even South Lake City would be greatly affected. What about the assigned task? Any updates? Caspian asked. Don't worry, Caspian. There are plenty of our people outside the Stewart family estate. Nobody's leaving the place, Sylvia said with a serious look on her face. Caspian nodded. Sylvia was reliable in carrying out her duties. Caspian had nothing to worry about. Sylvia had been working under Caspian for many years. They had fought hundreds of battles without making a slip. This time, they must reform the traditional martial arts sphere once and for all. Let's get to the Stewart family estate as soon as possible, Caspian said before he closed his eyes and took a rest. More than 10 minutes later, they arrived at the Stewart family estate. Caspian exited the car. He was taken aback to see that the Stewart family estate had changed a lot. The last time he was here, it was with Willow. They had visited to pay their respects. Today's visit was for a different purpose. They had come to take back the Eldorian scroll fragment. Kill them. Fuck you. I'll tear you apart. Come at me. We'll see who's better. Some of the traditional martial arts experts were already fighting with each other inside the Stewart family estate. It was complete mayhem. The doors of all the houses there were tightly shut. Everybody was afraid of these expert fighters. Let them have a taste of our strength. Sylvia, if they continue acting up, show no mercy and kill them all, Caspian said coldly. These bastards from the traditional martial arts sphere were ridiculous. They had disrupted the daily lives of the villagers. Yes, sir, Sylvia nodded her head. She led 30 armored soldiers into the battleground. In a near distance, two forces were embroiled in a heated fight. All of you, stop, Sylvia shouted. The people stopped immediately when they heard her. They looked at Sylvia and scowled. What do you want, pretty lady? Are you feeling lonely? I'll play with you. Yeah, we're really great. You'll love it. These people were pompous just because they knew a thing or two about fighting. The villagers would be doomed if these men decided to attack them. Sylvia's expression hardened. She was filled with fury. The people around could feel an air of menace emanating from her. At that moment, most of the expert fighters were stunned. Standing in front of them was no longer a beautiful woman but the god of death. Kill them! Sylvia charged toward them immediately. The armored soldiers followed closely behind. They tore through the two forces with ease. In the blink of an eye, they managed to break them apart. Those men could not even fight back. In just 2 minutes, many corpses began piling up. Anyone else wants to try? Sylvia asked. The expert fighters all quieted down. All signs of their arrogance were gone. They were all shocked. Sylvia and her team were too powerful. Their skills were impeccable, and they did not hold back. Caspian smiled coldly as he watched from a distance. A bunch of garbage. Where's your arrogance now? Sylvia said as she looked at the pile of corpses. The expert fighters surrounding them were all stunned. However, they did not plan on suffering silently. How arrogant. You think we're pushovers? That's right. Where the fuck did these bastards come from anyway? Everybody, let's teach them a lesson. Everyone from the traditional martial arts sphere suddenly united. Sylvia's act of killing their members provoked them greatly. Even though they were always brawling with one another, they never took it too far. However, as soon as Sylvia appeared, dozens of their members were killed immediately. Moreover, Sylvia and her team were really powerful. Kill them! Hundreds of the expert fighters charged at Sylvia with their united goal and hatred. They wanted so badly to kill her. Kill all of them! Sylvia shouted. She had only planned to scare these people, but who knew that they would be so thoughtless and even have the audacity to resist? 30 armored soldiers rushed out. Both sides collided. The armored soldiers had sharp daggers in their hands. Every time they swung, somebody died. These traditional martial arts fighters could not hold a candle to the armored soldiers. They were completely helpless against the well-trained armored soldiers. Sylvia stood on the sidelines with her hands folded across her chest. She had no intention of joining in. Aster and Avery were also dumbfounded. They knew that Caspian and Sylvia were very powerful, but these armored soldiers? Where the hell did they emerge from? How could they be so powerful? Even if it was just these armored soldiers, both of them stood no chance against them. They exchanged glances with a trace of fear in their eyes. They knew now that they must serve Caspian well in the future. Otherwise, they'd be doomed. In less than 10 minutes, the traditional martial arts experts were all killed. The blood on the ground was flowing like a river. The other expert fighters standing on the sidelines were all dumbfounded. Sylvia and the armored soldiers were way too powerful. It's all done. Caspian, Sylvia said as she walked up to Caspian. They were shocked to see Sylvia showing deference to Caspian. The fact that such a powerful person like Sylvia was treating Caspian with deference made them wonder who Caspian truly was. Not bad. Patrol the village with the armored soldiers. If you see anyone stirring up trouble, just kill them, Caspian said. These fighters from the traditional martial arts sphere would always pick on those who were weaker than them, but fear those who were stronger than them. Yes, sir? Sylvia nodded. When the villagers did not hear any more commotion, they came out to have a look. Once they saw the corpses scattered outside, they were utterly shocked. No need to worry, everyone. I'm Caspian. I've gotten rid of all the troublemaking thugs. If anyone dares to threaten your safety, I won't spare them, Caspian proclaimed to the villagers. When the villagers saw Caspian, they were all excited and emotional. Mr. Lynch, it's really him. With Mr. Lynch here, there's still hope for us. All the villagers had gathered outside. They knew how powerful Caspian was. Everyone in the Stewart family estate was extremely grateful to Caspian. Now that he had even gotten rid of the martial arts fighters, the villagers were even more excited. Mr. Lynch, thank God you arrived in time. The villagers had a resentful look on their faces. Those traditional martial arts fighters had brought them a lot of trouble. Caspian's face began to harden. These martial arts fighters truly had no martial arts ethics. Everybody, be quiet for a moment. I can assure you that the Stewart family estate won't be harmed. If anyone dares to threaten the Stewart family estate, I'll be the first one to fight back, Caspian proclaimed as he looked at the crowd. Chapter 395, The Origin of the Eldorian Scroll Fragment. As the Diatoran god of war, Caspian would naturally want to protect the safety of the citizens in Diatoran. The people from the traditional martial arts sphere were oppressive just because they knew how to fight. What a bunch of scum. Mr. Lynch, with you here, we no longer need to worry. Yeah, we can finally live a normal life. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. If it wasn't for you, We wouldn't even know what we should do." Many villagers knelt on the ground and thanked Caspian. For the past few days, their lives had been severely disrupted. They were only ordinary people. They could not do anything about the people from the traditional martial arts sphere. Thankfully, Caspian had shown up just in time. Caspian was their benefactor. "Please get up, everyone. There's no need for the formalities," Caspian said urgently. These were all part of his duty. When the armored soldiers witnessed this scene, they were in awe. They respected Caspian very much. Not only was he powerful, but he was also a responsible god of war. He was worthy of their dedication and loyalty. Aster and Avery were both astonished. The villagers respected Caspian so much. The villagers got up at Caspian's request. "Where's Mr. Stewart Sr.?" Caspian asked. "Mr. Stewart is at the lineage shrine," the villagers replied. "You may all get back to your things. I'll go and visit Mr. Stewart Sr., Caspian said as he headed toward the lineage shrine. When he arrived at the entrance of the lineage shrine, both Aster and Avery suddenly knelt before him. "Mr. Lynch, we've decided. From now on, we'll obey all of your orders. We'll swim through oceans and walk through fire without hesitation. Please allow us to follow you," they said with a serious look on their faces. The scene they witnessed earlier had shocked them greatly. Caspian's strength and great prestige had completely won them over. Nevertheless, both of them felt rather uneasy. What if Caspian did not plan to let them stay? "You may get up. I promise that you'll rise again as long as both of you remain sincere and loyal," Caspian said with a smile. Both Aster and Avery were overjoyed to hear this. They did not expect that Caspian would let them stay. He had even promised to help them rebuild their forces. "Thank you, Mr. Lynch. We'll do our very best from now on." Both of them thanked Caspian fervently. Caspian smiled. Now, both Aster and Avery had completely been won over by him. In the future, these two could be stationed in South Diatoran. This arrangement could make the place more stable as well. "You may get up now," Caspian said with a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Lynch." Both of them got up and bowed. "Wait outside," Caspian said before he walked into the shrine. Xandros was the only person in the shrine at that time. He was lying on a rocking chair with his eyes closed. Caspian did not wake him up. He walked over to him and sat before a stone table. "This tea is very fragrant." Caspian poured himself a cup of tea and tasted it. Xandros slowly opened his eyes and glanced at Caspian. He said, "Hey kid, you'd better not drink too much of it. I picked these camellias myself from the mountains. Leave some for me." "These camellias are good. Why don't you send me 20 pounds of them?" Caspian chuckled. Xandros grinned. Did Caspian think that this tea could be found everywhere? The camellias were originally picked from the trees in the mountains. After drying them in the sun, there was not much left. "You cheeky bastard. What made you think of coming to see me?" Xandros asked. "Great uncle, weren't you the one who invited me? Or perhaps you were so bored out of your mind that you pulled a prank on me?" Caspian said teasingly. Xandros laughed. "Have you dealt with the garbage outside?" Xandros asked playfully. "Mr. Stewart Sr., you sure have a good nose. You know everything that's happened outside." Caspian was momentarily stunned. Xandros had been at the lineage shrine the entire time. How could he not know about everything that happened in the village? "You punk! You're beating about the bush. Who do you think you're teasing?" Xandros glanced at Caspian. "Isn't it child's play for you to deal with that garbage?" he continued. Caspian looked at Xandros, looking rather surprised. Not many people knew of his identity as the Diatoran god of war. Even Willow had not discovered this fact. She still thought that Caspian was just a general officer. Could it be that Xandros knew his real identity? "Don't ask me how I know. There are no secrets in this world." Xandros took a sip of the tea. "Now I really have to know. Do you know my real identity?" Caspian said with a smile. "I've lived here all my life. How would I know what your real identity is? But I do know that you're no average person. You bear some semblance to the king. But the king is still very young. You're really hard to read," Xandros said as he eyed Caspian up and down. He made a rough guess that Caspian's identity was more sophisticated. Caspian was momentarily stunned. Xandros had made a good guess. "Stop making fun of me. If I were lucky enough to be royalty, why would I still stay in a small place like South Lake City? I should be indoors it," Caspian said with a smile. All right. Let's stop playing around and get down to business. What do you think about the Eldorian scroll fragment? Xandros suddenly turned serious and asked. Caspian also switched his demeanor immediately. Why would an Eldorian scroll fragment be in the Stewart family estate, Mr. Stewart Sr.? Caspian asked, confused. Logically speaking, a significant item such as an Eldorian scroll fragment would never appear in a small place like the Stewart family estate. Previously, he had also obtained an Eldorian scroll fragment by chance. Following that, Caspian's strength skyrocketed, and he became the Diatoran god of war. Xandros began to ponder as his eyes wandered into the distance. The history dates back to hundreds of years ago. Xandros began telling a magnificent legendary story. The ancestors of the Stewart family were powerful traditional martial artists. Back then, the Stewart family became an elite family of traditional martial arts. They also owned an Eldorian scroll fragment. However, the Stewart family dwindled, and the Eldorian scroll fragment fell into the hands of Xandros' father. Xandros continued to protect the Eldorian scroll fragment. The people of the Stewart family estate have been living here for generations, and it's also we could protect the Eldorian scroll fragment. Unfortunately, this news has spread to outsiders, Xandros said with resignation. The Eldorian scroll fragment was a great deal. Back then, the ancestors of the Stewart family wanted to destroy the Eldorian scroll fragment. In the end, it turned out that the Eldorian scroll fragment was indestructible. Now that many traditional martial arts experts have shown up here in the Stewart family estate, what do you plan to do? Mr. Stewart Sr.? Caspian asked. Caspian already had a foolproof plan. Nonetheless, he still wanted to hear what Xandros had to say. Caspian knew very well that Xandros was no ordinary person. The fact that he could live and safeguard this secret to this day was a testament to his prowess. It's simple. My plan is to pass the Eldorian scroll fragment to you. What do you think? Xandros teased. Chapter 396, The Key to Obtaining the Secret Treasure. Caspian was momentarily stunned after hearing what Xandros said. He thought that Xandros was cracking a joke. The Eldorian scroll fragment was a highly coveted item in the traditional martial arts sphere. Xandros was actually going to pass this treasure over to him? He was not even close with Xandros. They had only met 2 or 3 times. Caspian could not comprehend how Xandros could trust him so much that he would pass the Eldorian scroll fragment to him. Stop playing with me, Mr. Stewart Sr. The Eldorian scroll fragment is a treasure that's coveted by everyone. Why don't you just keep it for yourself? Caspian asked, seemingly confused. He was doubtful about what Xandros had said. This old cunning man. He was already over 100 years old. Who knew what he was scheming? He could just be rambling away without meaning what he said. Caspian was being precautious. If it were someone else, they would have been elated to be able to obtain the Eldorian scroll fragment. Little rascal, do you think I'd harm you? I can't use it for myself. Our ancestors have set rules for us. We aren't allowed to use the Eldorian scroll fragment. We can only protect it. Besides, the Eldorian scroll fragment isn't in my hands. It's at the ancestral cemetery, Xandros scorned. He was perplexed as well. Why did his ancestors choose to do something like this? If the Eldorian scroll fragment could be retained for their family's own use, they could improve their strength through some practice. You can just hand the Eldorian scroll fragment over to the villagers. They're all people of the Stewart family estate. They must be trustworthy. Caspian remained adamant in not believing Xandros. Strictly speaking, Caspian was only an outsider. It was not fully appropriate for him to obtain the Eldorian scroll fragment. I've thought of that before as well. But these villagers are just ordinary people. They can't possibly practice using it, Xandros said, feeling rather frustrated. Xandros was extremely despondent. The Stewart family had been established for hundreds of years, but they were gradually dwindling. These villagers had never even been exposed to the traditional martial arts sphere. Caspian seemed unwilling to accept it. This made Xandros even more disheartened. If it were anyone else, they would definitely be extremely excited. The Eldorian scroll fragment is at the ancestral cemetery. Even if I want it, there's nothing I can do to obtain it, Caspian said. Fine, I know what you're thinking. I'll just be straightforward with you. The reason I'm giving this to you is because you're Willow's husband, which makes you part of the Stewart family. Moreover, you're really powerful, which means that you can protect the Eldorian scroll fragment. If this Eldorian scroll fragment were to remain here in the Stewart family estate, it'd only bring catastrophe to the village, Xandros said, He knew that if he did not make it clear, Caspian would continue probing until the end. "Do you still have the engraved emerald pendant I gave you the last time?" Zandros asked. "Of course," Caspian said as he took the pendant out of his pocket. "This emerald pendant is very important. You can only obtain the Eldorian scroll fragment if you have this pendant with you. Otherwise, it'll be useless even if you have millions of soldiers with you," Zandros said in a serious tone. Hearing this, Caspian cursed in his heart. It turned out that Zandros had already planned everything. "I can't believe you deceived me, Mr. Stewart Sr., Caspian said irritably. Zandros laughed. "It's your fault for being so powerful," Zandros said, smirking. It was at this moment that an earth-shatteringly loud sound was heard. Zandros' expression hardened. "Something's wrong. There seems to be something going on at the ancestral cemetery." As soon as he finished his sentence, Zandros got up immediately and was gone in the blink of an eye. He moved at the speed of light. Caspian was stunned. Was this person even a centenarian? Even an innate grandmaster would not be this fast. Even though Caspian had been on the battlefield for many years, he had never seen anyone with such speed before. When he finally came back to his senses, he rushed out as well. "Mr. Lynch, what happened?" Aster and Avery shouted urgently when they saw Caspian run out. "What are you waiting for?" "Follow me," Caspian yelled loudly. He caught sight of Zandros' figure and ran after him. Even the traditional martial arts experts at the Stewart family estate noticed that something was wrong. Everyone began running toward the direction from where the loud noise was heard. Less than 1,000 meters north of the Stewart family estate was a tall mountain. It was called Mount Evercloud. That was the cemetery of the Stewart family. Any member of the Stewart family would be buried there when they died. The loud noise that was heard earlier had come from the mountain's direction. At that moment, many boulders were rolling down from Mount Evercloud. Nixon had also appeared on Mount Evercloud with 4,000 experts. Standing next to him was Horace. His arm had been bandaged. Since he had always been pretty powerful, he was no longer in a critical condition. Nevertheless, he had lost an arm forever. "This is the cemetery of the Stewart family?" Nixon asked, frowning. "That's right. The ancestors of the Stewart family estate were all buried here after they died," Horace replied deferentially. "It seems like the Eldorian scroll fragment is around here somewhere," Nixon said thoughtfully. Horace took a few steps back. His face was filled with resentment as he looked at Nixon. Nixon did not regard him as an equal. Ever since he got injured, Nixon had been acting all vague and odd around him. Suddenly, hundreds of figures appeared in the distance. They were all wearing masks. They looked mysterious. "Shadowgate," Nixon said through gritted teeth. Nixon was the head elder of the TMAA. He had heard of Shadowgate. The people from Shadowgate must be here for the Eldorian scroll fragment as well. The mission to snatch the Eldorian scroll fragment would reach a stalemate. "I guess the people from the TMAA are also here. It has become more challenging for us to snatch the Eldorian scroll fragment," Gilbert said when he noticed Nixon and the others. The TMAA and Shadowgate had always been at odds with each other. This time, both sides wished to obtain the Eldorian scroll fragment. Moreover, other forces had also appeared. It would be really difficult to obtain the Eldorian scroll fragment. According to my investigation, the people of TMAA have a conflict with Caspian. Caspian boasts himself as the leader of the Alliance of the Southern Forces. This has offended the TMAA. In order to scare Caspian, they've already destroyed Azure Flames and Skyfeather Pavilion. However, what came as a surprise was that Caspian cut off one of Horace's arms and even obliterated thousands of expert martial artists. Gilbert laughed. "This is getting interesting. I can't believe Caspian has enemies everywhere. Does he have enmity with everyone?" Gilbert laughed. He suddenly figured that Caspian must be something. He had enemies in Dord City. He had offended Shadowgate, and now, even the people from the TMAA wanted to look for him. It seemed like the entire Diatoran was filled with Caspian's enemies. "It seems like the Eldorian scroll fragment is around here. We have to be prepared," Gilbert instructed. More and more people had arrived at Mount Evercloud. There were almost tens of thousands of people on the mountain. Even the Morrison family from Dord City had come. There were 10 people from the Morrison family. The leader was Jin Morrison. The young lady the traditional martial arts experts could not help but steal glances at Jin. She was the most brilliant one among the younger generation of the Morrison family. She had already become an innate grandmaster, even though she was only 25 years old. Chapter 397 Provocation of the Traditional Martial Arts Association. For ordinary people to reach the innate grandmaster stage, they would have to be at least middle-aged. Some were even 80 to 90 years old. Others might not even have the chance to be an innate grandmaster in their lifetime. As for Jin, she had already become an innate grandmaster at such a young age. There was no doubt that she was talented. Jin had intended to place all her attention on dealing with Southlake Corporation. However, the news of the Eldorian scroll fragment's appearance had reached the Morrison family. The head of the Morrison family, Jin's father, ordered her to bring their people to retrieve the Eldorian scroll fragment. Jin was reluctant to be involved in the matters of the traditional martial arts sphere. She could not be bothered even if it was a rare treasure. For now, all she wanted was to have Caspian go back to her. As long as Caspian could go back to her, she was willing to give everything up. When she heard that Caspian had appeared at the Stewart family estate, she rushed over immediately. All she wanted was to see Caspian and spend more time with him. Caspian Lynch, the leader of the Alliance of South Diatoran, has arrived, someone announced while Jin was still deep in her thoughts. She turned around immediately. At the same time, tens of thousands of traditional martial arts experts turned their heads toward the direction of the announcement as well. Everyone focused their attention on Caspian. Caspian was standing on high ground. Tens of thousands of eyes were fixed on Caspian. Everybody was curious to know who this fearless person was to have claimed themselves as the leader of the Alliance. The fighters from the TMAA were not to be messed with. Even with so many pairs of eyes fixed on him, Caspian was still well composed. The same could not be said for Aster and Avery. Aster had the worst reaction. When the announcement was made and everybody had their eyes focused on them, Aster could not help but tremble, even though he had been through many trials before. Aster wanted to stay out of the limelight, but he could not disobey Caspian's orders. Aster's face had turned red, and Avery had to hold his laughter in. It could be the first time he had ever received the attention of so many people. Greetings. I'm Caspian Lynch, the leader of the Alliance of the Southern Forces. You have all traveled thousands of miles to come to Southlake City. We welcome your arrival. Caspian waved at the crowd with a smile. When the crowd heard this, they were stunned for a moment. How pompous of Caspian to act like he owned the entire city. Who did he think he was? Who's this guy? The leader of the Alliance of the Southern Forces? We've never even heard of such a thing before. He's so full of himself that he made up such a title for himself. Doesn't he know that everyone here is a powerful figure in the traditional martial arts sphere? All the experts were discussing among themselves. It could be said that nobody knew that Caspian was the leader of the Alliance. Back then at Galacrest, only a portion of the people knew that Caspian was the leader of the Alliance. When they saw Caspian acting this way, they were filled with disdain. Half of the people from the traditional martial arts sphere were gathered here. It was a death wish to be this boastful in front of them. Horace looked at Caspian with resentment. It was all because of Caspian that he had lost his arm. You must be Caspian Lynch? Nixon asked coldly. That's right. I'm Caspian Lynch, the leader of the Alliance of the Southern Forces. And you are? Caspian said with a smile. When he saw Horace standing nearby, he had guessed that this person was Nixon. He asked this question deliberately. When Caspian finished his sentence, Nixon's expression went frigid. All the other traditional martial arts experts were looking at Caspian with an amused look on their faces. Nixon was the head elder of the TMAA. They also knew about the fact that the TMAA wanted to dominate the traditional martial arts sphere of the entire Diatoran. The TMAA refused to accept the fact that Caspian had suddenly appeared and claimed himself to be the leader of the Alliance. If someone claimed themselves to be the leader of the Alliance of the Northern Forces, then the traditional martial arts sphere of the entire Diatoran would be in chaos. When the time came, wouldn't the TMAA be a joke? Caspian, I'm the head elder of the Traditional Martial Arts Association. I must destroy you, Nixon sneered. Hiding behind that smile was a murderous intent. Was this the strength of a third-tier innate grandmaster? Just the energy alone that was emanating from his body could shock the people around him. The Traditional Martial Arts Association? What's that? I've never heard of it before. An inferior community is claiming itself as the Traditional Martial Arts Association? Caspian mocked. To put it bluntly, the TMAA is just a bunch of disorderly people gathered together. Who I really am has nothing to do with any of you. If you dare piss me off, I'll pick a day and destroy the entire team in AA, including your chairman." When Caspian was done speaking, Nixon's expression darkened. "What the hell? Who the fuck is this dude? How dare he speak to our head elder in this manner? He must have a death wish. He's Caspian Lynch. I heard that he destroyed Galacrest of the southern region and the Mahayan Pavilion of East Cove. Such a troublemaker." Everyone was having a heated discussion. They did not expect Caspian to be such a savage. He could even disregard the protector of the TMAA. Suddenly, everyone looked at Caspian with astonishment. Both Galacrest and the Mahayan Pavilion were considered to be the stronger forces in the southern region. If Caspian was able to destroy both forces, that could only mean that he was very powerful. The crowd was gloating. They wanted to know how Nixon would respond. If he did not put Caspian in his place, the Team AA might be ridiculed. "You're good with words, Caspian. But how good are you at fighting?" Nixon sneered. Suddenly, a curved dagger appeared in his hand. He charged at Caspian without warning. "I'm going to kill you today, Caspian. I'll let everyone know that the TMAA is not to be messed with," Nixon said coldly. The dagger emanated a brilliant cold flash. In the blink of an eye, Nixon had already appeared in front of Caspian. His speed and strength were truly shocking. Nixon exuded an energy that was really powerful. Everybody was shaken. Indeed, this was the strength of an innate grandmaster. Even a single move was so impactful. At that moment, all the traditional martial arts experts were mourning for Caspian. Today was definitely the last day for Caspian. Fabian, Charles, Horace, and all the others were staring at Caspian. They were all hoping that Nixon could get rid of Caspian once and for all. "It seems like Nixon's going to miss," Gilbert suddenly said with a smile. When the people heard him, they were extremely shocked. Fabian was even more taken aback. Nixon was the head elder of the TMAA. His strength was second only to the chairman's. Even such a powerful person was no match for Caspian? They could not believe that something like this was happening. However, Gilbert did not elaborate further. He had fought Caspian before. He was no match for Caspian, let alone Nixon. Caspian looked calm and collected. Sure, Nixon was powerful. However, in Caspian's eyes, it was still not enough. Caspian stood there with his hands behind his back. He was not affected by Nixon at all. Nixon had a ferocious smile on his face. He could already picture Caspian's death in his head. Chapter 398, Defeating the Head Elder with One Punch. "Mr. Xenos, kill him." Horace raised his arms and shouted. He wished he could just cut Caspian up into 1,000 pieces. "Victory for Mr. Xenos! Victory for Mr. Xenos! Victory for Mr. Xenos!" Thousands of the people from the TMAA raised their arms and shouted. "Go to hell!" Nixon yelled as he attacked Caspian with the dagger. He attacked without holding anything back. Even though he did not think that dealing with Caspian would require much effort, he still chose to invest all his strength into this attack. He wanted to ensure that everything was perfect and that he could finish him off with one strike. As long as Caspian could be eliminated, nobody would dare to challenge the status of the Team AA in the future. The dagger in Nixon's hand struck Caspian hard on the neck. Everybody was stunned. Could Caspian be so weak that he could not even ward this off? In the end, he was all bark and no bite. Only Gilbert remained calm. He had already seen the telltale signs. The next moment, Nixon realized his effort was all for nothing. Something's off. Nixon was shocked. That was just an after image. He had gone all out, but it was all in vain. When did Caspian move away? And Nixon had not noticed at all. How terrifying were Caspian's powers? One had to at least be a Supreme Grandmaster to achieve this kind of strength. The level of the Supreme Grandmaster came after the innate Grandmaster. A level even higher would be the ultimate Supreme Grandmaster. There were only a handful of ultimate Supreme Grandmasters. They were rare in the entire Diatoran. "You're weaker than I imagine." A voice full of disdain came from behind Nixon. Nixon was shocked. Without any hesitation, he turned around immediately and attacked Caspian again. "What a joke! You already lost the moment you made that move," Caspian sneered. Caspian threw a powerful punch at Nixon. That speed was frightening. Before Nixon could return to his senses, Caspian's punch had already landed on his chest. Nixon began coughing out blood. Then, He fell to the ground. The crowd was stunned. They could not believe that the scene unfolding before them was real. Nixon, the head elder of the TMAA, was defeated just like that? He was defeated with just one punch? Everybody could not comprehend the situation. Caspian's punch was too powerful. Such a weak piece of trash, Caspian said disdainfully. Everybody was extremely shocked. The head elder of the TMAA was nothing before Caspian. What about the rest? Could it mean that they were worse than trash? Everyone felt their cheeks burning, as if they had just been brutally humiliated by Caspian. Aster and Avery were also shocked. They knew that Caspian was powerful, but they did not expect that he was this powerful. How could the head elder of the TMAA not be able to withstand one punch? Both of them were filled with respect toward Caspian. At the same time, they felt extremely proud to be working under Caspian. They also felt really lucky that they had not fought with Caspian. Otherwise, they would definitely be corpses now. Horace was also completely astonished. He felt lucky for only losing an arm. Mr. Xenos! Mr. Xenos! The underlings of the team in double rushed over to check on Nixon. Nixon was currently in a miserable state. His entire body was covered in blood. It was unclear whether he was dead or alive. "Are you okay, Mr. Xenos?" the crowd asked with concern. Nixon threw up more blood. "Are you all right, Mr. Xenos?" Horace followed the rest and approached Nixon as well. However, he was secretly happy. "I'm fine," Nixon said as he waved his hand weakly. He might have said that he was fine, but in reality, he could feel that his internal organs had been destroyed. The pain he felt was immense. He never expected Caspian to be this powerful. How could a tiny place like South Lake City hide such a powerful person? It seemed that only the chairman could compete with Caspian. Nobody in the TMAA would be able to fight him. "Retreat!" Nixon gestured to retreat when he finally got up. At that moment, they must escape as soon as possible. They could seek their revenge at a later date. He was afraid that he would become the butt of everyone's joke once news of this defeat got out. The TMAA would suffer humiliation if that happened. Horace helped Nixon leave the place. Thousands of expert fighters from the TMAA fled the scene as well. They're running away? The TMAA is actually making a run for it? All the expert martial artists were dumbfounded to see them flee. But Caspian was calm and composed. Nixon and the others were just a bunch of rabble. Killing them would be easy. There was no need to rush. Tens of thousands of traditional martial arts experts were horrified. The strength Caspian had showcased was really shocking. It seemed like Caspian would be the one to obtain the Eldorian scroll fragment. Gilbert chuckled. "I didn't expect you to be so good, Mr. Lynch. Even Nixon was no match for you. Nobody can compete with you for the Eldorian scroll fragment anymore," Gilbert said with a smile. Ah, Caspian scorned. Gilbert was implying something else. Everyone had come for the Eldorian scroll fragment. Caspian stood out from among the rest. Everybody else would definitely regard him as a common enemy. Sure enough, after Gilbert had finished his sentence, all of the traditional martial arts experts turned to look at Caspian. At the same time, they had a shared goal, and that was to get rid of Caspian first. As long as they could get rid of Caspian, their chances of getting the fragment would be higher. "Oh, it's you! You had run away that time. So why did you show up again?" Caspian taunted. The crowd was stunned. They looked at Gilbert. Shadowgate was a mysterious organization, and their members were all ruthless. Caspian had just been involved in a conflict with the people from the TMAA. Now, he was looking for trouble with the people from Shadowgate. Could it be that Caspian was really not afraid of dying? "Don't be so arrogant, Caspian. There are close to tens of thousands of traditional martial arts experts here. Are you sure you can handle this many people?" Gilbert said angrily. Caspian smiled and calmly said, "You've lost to me once before, and yet you're still this arrogant?" When Caspian was done speaking, the crowd was enlightened. Caspian had actually defeated Gilbert, the 10th Elder of Shadowgate, once before. Back then, when they were in New Bay, Gilbert had battled with Caspian in order to save Charles. He was also defeated by Caspian's punch. Not many people knew about this. Now that Caspian had mentioned it in front of everyone, it caused an uproar. Even the 10th Elder of Shadowgate is no match for Caspian? This can't be. Gilbert's powers are above that of Nixon. Where did this Caspian guy come from? Why are his powers so terrifying? How powerful is he? The people were extremely shocked. When they looked at Caspian, they were filled with fear. Nixon and Gilbert were already considered powerful, yet they were still no match for Caspian. How powerful was Caspian? At the same time, everyone looked at Gilbert. They were anticipating how he would deal with Caspian. Chapter 399, The Withdrawal of Tens of Thousands of People. There's no need to be so arrogant, Caspian. You had the upper hand back then. Since there are a lot of martial artists here, I'll spare your life. If you continue being unreasonable, I'll kill you, Gilbert said. Let's go, he continued. He knew very well that he was no match for Caspian. It was better for him to leave as soon as he could. If he was defeated in front of the others, his reputation would be tarnished. Caspian let out a laugh. I can't believe there would be anyone who'd dare to threaten me. But why are you leaving? Let's compete. Isn't Shadowgate powerful? Why are you trying to escape just like the Team AA? You're all useless, Caspian scorned. Gilbert felt chills all over. Caspian's energy was overpowering. Nevertheless, he gritted his teeth. Caspian had insulted him and Shadowgate in front of everyone else. He was totally disrespecting them. The subordinates of Shadowgate gnashed their teeth as they were all filled with hatred. Gilbert had not given them an order. Otherwise, they would have immediately rushed toward Caspian to teach him a lesson. Caspian, you must want to die really badly. Huh? Mr. Shane, please allow me to beat the shit out of him, Fabian shouted, wishing he could just charge at Caspian right away. Shut up! What do you know? Caspian's taunting us on purpose. If you rush over now, you'll fall into his trap, Gilbert yelled. Charles, who was standing on the sidelines, was secretly happy to see Fabian in a miserable state. Charles hoped that he could surpass Fabian's position in Shadowgate. Mr. Shane, please let us kill Caspian. Mr. Shane, allow us to kill him. Yeah, when have we ever had to accept this kind of insult? The subordinates of Shadowgate could not hold it in anymore. If they were to leave without fighting back, it would be too humiliating for Shadowgate. Let's just leave, Gilbert shouted, totally ignoring their requests. But the subordinates of Shadowgate were reluctant to just leave like that. Why? Are you going to disobey my order? Gilbert said coldly as he glanced at them. Gilbert began exuding a menacing energy. The subordinates were covered in a cold sweat. They were afraid to continue resisting. Gilbert turned around to leave. If they stayed any longer, he would not be able to hold himself back from attacking Caspian. Caspian was good at making people hate him. I have so many enemies. Huh? Caspian said with a smug smile. Even though Charles was wearing a mask, Caspian could still clearly see those eyes of his. Caspian was not surprised by the fact that Charles had joined Shadowgate. Back then, the people who rescued Charles were the ones from Shadowgate. Caspian felt rather irritable that Gilbert had chosen to leave. He had planned to provoke Gilbert in order to incite his subordinates to attack him. Because if they did, he would have a reason to strike them. After all, the members of Shadowgate were all pests. Even though he had insulted Shadowgate, they remained unmoved and even escaped. This is so boring. What a useless bunch, Caspian said as he shook his head. Everyone else scoffed. Caspian was really arrogant. Who else is planning to come forward and challenge me? Caspian said with his hands behind his back, looking majestic. That arrogance of his. All of the martial artists there were brilliant fighters. Never before had they seen someone as arrogant as Caspian. No one else came close. No one? Not even one? Caspian smiled contemptuously. He took 2 steps forward. His steps were filled with magnificence and opulence. I'm not referring to anyone in particular, but all of you are trash in my eyes, Caspian taunted. These words pierced everyone's heart. Every martial artist there felt as if Caspian had just slapped them across the face. He might have offended everyone. Aster and Avery were trembling with fear. They were afraid that the tens of thousands of martial artists would attack them at the same time. Caspian's arrogance exceeded their imagination. These martial artists were the best among their peers. Every single one of them had strength that was above the 3rd tier. If they were to keep count, there were at least thousands of eternal grandmasters present. And there were hundreds of innate grandmasters present. If these people were to attack at the same time, any organization would be obliterated immediately no matter how strong they were. Caspian's words had really angered everyone. How arrogant! I can't believe he's humiliating us. Let's teach him a lesson. Yeah, we can't just let him insult us. Tens of thousands of people were having a heated argument. Suddenly, the sound of multiple weapons being drawn could be heard. They had all taken out their weapons. They were all looking at Caspian menacingly. "Come at me, loser," Caspian said. His words were filled with contempt. Aster and Avery were scared for him. How could Caspian defeat tens of thousands of opponents? Miss Morrison, Caspian's really arrogant. He might have defeated the TMAA, but how could he be this arrogant? Miss Morrison, we can't just endure this humiliation. Let us teach Caspian a lesson. The experts of the Morrison family could no longer hold it in. Caspian was too arrogant to have humiliated them like this. The Morrison family was influential in Dord City. Everyone else had always given deference to them. They had never met anyone as arrogant as Caspian before. If they did not put Caspian back in his place, the Morrison family would not be able to maintain their prominence in the future. "Stop, all of you. Without my order, you'd better not move an inch," Jin shouted coldly. All of the experts of the Morrison family were instantaneously silenced. Jin held a high position within the Morrison family. Nobody would dare to disobey her. They were just really confused. Why was Jin stopping them from attacking Caspian? Jin was deeply infatuated with Caspian. She could even run up to him to give him a hug right now. Caspian was the man of her dreams. Back when they were in the military, Caspian was everyone's idol. He had only used a few years' time to become the Diatoran god of war from a mere soldier. He was the enemy's nightmare. So many years had passed, and yet Caspian had remained the same. He was still so domineering. Jin was looking at Caspian lovingly, completely smitten. At that moment, everyone noticed the change in Caspian's expression. They felt that it was a little strange. Was there anything that could affect this powerful man? In fact, Caspian had already noticed Jin out of the corner of his eye, but he did not turn to look at her. Meeting Jin in this place was going to complicate matters. Caspian was in a dilemma. Jin used to be his comrade. Moreover, back when they were still teenagers, both of them had feelings for each other. What should he do if they were to fight later? Could he bear to lay a finger on her? Caspian was torn. Nevertheless, the tens of thousands of martial artists had slowly dispersed. "Caspian, don't be so pompous. Just you wait. We'll come back for you after we obtain the Eldorian scroll fragment." "That's right. You're going to die for having offended the people of the traditional martial arts sphere. Let's go." Tens of thousands of martial artists all dispersed after taking a jab at Caspian. It seemed as if they were running for their lives. Chapter 400, a late-night visit. "What a bunch of garbage," Caspian said with a smirk. These martial artists had come from various places in Diatoran. They had their personal disputes. Nobody would want to take the lead in challenging Caspian. After all, there was nothing that they could gain from this. Their top priority was to obtain the Eldorian scroll fragment. Aster and Avery had already prepared for a bloody battle. They were pretty surprised to see that the martial artists had dispersed. Both of them looked at each other and let out a sigh of relief. It was really terrifying to work with Caspian. "Miss Morrison, should we be leaving?" one person from the Morrison family asked when they saw that everyone else had left. Only Jin remained standing there. She kept her gaze on Caspian. Only when she heard the question did her gaze break. Jin was very disappointed. Caspian did not look at her at all. Did Caspian dislike her this much? Tears welled up in her eyes. She took a few deep breaths to calm her emotions. "Let's go," Jin ordered. She gave Caspian one last glance before leaving reluctantly. The peak of the mountain was bustling with commotion earlier. Now, it had instantaneously become empty. A colossal crack appeared at the peak of Mount Evercloud. It seemed like the Eldorian scroll fragment was about to appear. When the time came, there would certainly be a huge war. It was at that moment that a figure rushed over speedily. Xandros came toward Caspian and stood before him. When Caspian saw Xandros, he smirked. "Why did you only come now, Mr. Stewart Sr.? I've already settled everything." Xandros had clearly come to Mount Evercloud before him, but he was nowhere to be seen. He only showed up after everything had been resolved. This cunning old man. Xandros laughed. "It won't hurt for young folks like you to receive more training. You can't possibly have me fight those savages. You know how cruel they can be." "I'd like to add a few more years to my lifespan," Xandros said with a smile. Caspian was speechless to hear that. Nevertheless, He did not retort. On a serious note, Mr. Stewart Sr., these people mean trouble. What do you plan to do about them? We can't possibly have all of them killed, can we? The fight for the Eldorian scroll fragment would be a brutal one, Caspian asked. When the time came, there was no saying what lengths they would go to in order to achieve their goal. Killing them would not bring any losses. Caspian was just afraid that they would hold the villagers to ransom once cornered. I have no idea what I should do as well. You've seen it yourself. There are so many of them. Each one's tougher to deal with than the other. If they happen to threaten the lives of the villagers, an old man like me won't be able to bear the burden. Xandros sighed. Don't worry too much, Mr. Stewart Sr. I've brought more than 100 elites with me. If we do encounter any trouble, I'll have the armored soldiers escort the villagers out of here, Caspian said after giving it some deep thought. I can't thank you enough, Caspian, Xandros said as he thanked Caspian fervently. There was nothing Xandros could do about the crisis this time. Otherwise, he would not have burdened Caspian. Caspian was truly powerful. There's no need to thank me, Mr. Stewart Sr. I'm just doing what I should. Just don't fool me, Caspian said with a smile. As the Diatoran god of war, it was his duty to step forward and protect the villagers from the impending danger. Xandros laughed. Not bad. You really are worthy of being the son-in-law of the Stewart family. I know that you're really powerful. Those martial artists all left crestfallen. Even I'm in awe of you. This makes me think of my golden days. It's just too bad that I'm old now, Xandros exclaimed. All right, Mr. Stewart Sr. No more of those courteous words, Caspian said. Xandros smiled gently. He was not wrong about Caspian. The next few days will be difficult. I hope there won't be any chaos, Xandros murmured. Mr. Stewart Sr., there are still some things I have to attend to. I'll make a move first. Caspian left as soon as he finished his sentence. Aster and Avery followed closely behind. That night, all of the villagers of the Stewart family were in their homes. Caspian stayed at the elementary school as he did not want to bother any of the villagers. He would not be bothering anyone as the school was empty at night. Caspian, we've killed a total of 500 people today. Nobody dares to stir up trouble in the Stewart family estate anymore, Sylvia reported. Caspian was sitting on a chair with a calm look on his face. Sylvia had brought the armored soldiers along with her to patrol the Stewart family estate. If anyone was to try anything shady, they would kill them on the spot. Well done. Anyone who dares to cause any trouble must be eliminated. Also, increase the night patrol sessions, Caspian ordered. Yes, Caspian. I have the armored soldiers patrol in shifts to ensure the safety of the Stewart family estate, Sylvia replied. Caspian nodded and closed his eyes. Today had been a tiring day for him. In the dark of night, a figure sneaked into the lineage shrine quietly. Xandros was alone in the lineage shrine. Even though it was already late at night, Xandros was not feeling sleepy at all. He could not get himself to fall asleep as he was ruminating on the matters of the Stewart family estate. Who are you? I dare you to show yourself, Xandros suddenly shouted. As soon as he finished his sentence, a masked man in a black robe appeared. Shadowgate? Xandros murmured as his face went frigid. He did not expect the people of Shadowgate to be so audacious as to step into the lineage shrine. It's me, great uncle, the masked man answered in a deep voice. Stop playing. I don't know you, Xandros said coldly. How could he know anyone from Shadowgate? The people of Shadowgate were unscrupulous. How could he It's me, great uncle, the masked man answered in a deep voice. Stop playing. I don't know you, Xandros said coldly. How could he know anyone from Shadowgate? The people of Shadowgate were unscrupulous. They would do whatever it took to achieve their goals. Have you forgotten about me, great uncle? The masked man said as he removed his mask. There were a few scars on his face. Fabian! Xandros was stunned for a moment. It turned out to be Fabian. He knew of this great-grandson. But why did he join Shadowgate? Fabian put on his mask again and said, I'll just get to the point. Great uncle, I'm here today to ask for a favor. I hope that you can help me obtain the Eldorian scroll fragment. Don't even think about it. Xandros cut him off. I'll never help Shadowgate. From now on, you're no longer a member of the Stewart family, Xandros said coldly. Fabian was an adopted child anyway. Now that he had joined Shadowgate, there was no point in keeping him as a member of the Stewart family. Calm down, great uncle. Gilbert has already promised that if we succeed in helping Shadowgate, they'll donate $1.5 billion to the Stewart family estate. $1.5 billion was an astronomical amount to the Stewart family estate in their current state. Fabian was sure that Xandros would not be able to resist the temptation. In a small place like the Stewart family estate, $1.5 billion could give the villagers a lavish life. As the village chief, Xandros had no reason to refuse. "Oh, Fabian, it seems like you really don't know me. It's a fact that the Stewart family estate is poor. But we have dignity. We will never betray ourselves for money. Seeing as you're a Stewart, I'll let you go. You'd better scram. Otherwise, don't blame me for turning my back on you," Xandros said scornfully.